Hey everyone, happy contact in the desert. Have you been having the most amazing time already? Well, you are in a great place. I was just reading Justin's whole bio. How many of you actually met him before? And how many it's your first time to get to be with him? Woohoo! Well, we are honored to have you here.
The honor's mine.
And Justin has such an amazing background. How many of you already saw him today, earlier today? Did you do one this morning?
No, I didn't.
First? Okay, sorry.
No problem.
I've been running around. But anyways, Justin has done everything from spirituality, philosophy, psychology. It looks like we're off for a blueprint for a better world. Let's give our beautiful brother, Justin Deschamps, a warm contact in the desert. Welcome and all of our love, and thank you for this mystical journey.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get started. So for the next 2 hours, we're going to explore and imagine a benevolent future for humanity. So this is going to be advanced material, and I think a lot of the people here are going to find this resonates with them because it already assumes that some of the ET contact material we've seen over the years is actually true and valid in some way. So we're going to be able to analyze that. And it's for those people who feel the call to be a change agent and are looking for practical knowledge for co-creating a better world. So what does a better world look like? How will this vision help us? What can ET cultures teach us? What makes a truly benevolent society work? We're going to learn about all that today. So part one, Golden Age and Modeling. So imagine a world of benevolence, peace, joy, justice, prosperity. Imagine a world of gratifying life purpose and deep, meaningful experience. Imagine a world that is open, free, and adventurous, where free energy and healing technologies are available to all people. Imagine where the environment is clean and healthy, supported by amazing technology for that purpose. Imagine a world where crime is virtually non-existent, where poverty is a thing of the past, where work is enriching and drudgery has ended. That is where we're headed, everybody. So how do we get there? Well, it sounds amazing, but how do we do this? Well, there's a few different ways we can look at this. From a psychological perspective, how do individuals change by making contact with an ideal or a model? Biologically, we're already pre-designed to mold our thoughts, attitudes, and values via contact with other individuals in the world. And spiritually, human beings need a coherent value system that encourages growth of mind, body, and spirit. So societies change because of social progress via active individuals capable of persuading others via discussions of merit. That's everybody right here. Ideas are the fuel, discussion is the pumping action, and consensus and unity is the engines of change. So what is ET modeling? Well, the assumption is that advanced ET cultures have already solved many of the challenges that we're trying to solve right now. So we can use this information as a model for trying to shape our ideal world. So for the purposes of this talk, we're going to assume that some of this information we've heard from contactees and channelers has something to teach us, despite the fact that we can't confirm it, so we can contemplate it to see what we can get and distill from this information that we've accumulated over the years. So the source for this material includes, but is not limited to, The Law of One, the Seth material, Barbara McKinney, Bashar, the Urantia Book, the Hidden Hand material, Dan Winter's synopsises, and a whole bunch of other sources that I can't list here. So each characteristic or attribute that I'm going to be presenting in this talk of an enlightened ET culture has already been evaluated for its merit, and it makes logical, practical sense. So we're going to synthesize a lot of information that we've probably heard from a whole bunch of different sources. So I'm going to present these concepts in an axiomatic style. So it means I'm going to say them as if they are true in prepositional statements, and it's easy for you to understand. But I don't want you to just blindly believe what I'm saying. Always use your discernment and contemplate things for yourself. So, the ET hierarchy. In analyzing ET cultures, a clear hierarchy of organization emerges. It appears as though the cosmos is organized by various groups of beings that form alliances and cooperatives for the purpose of furthering their agenda. So the ET hierarchy ascends by way of coherence and competence, so that's how it's ordered or organized. Cultural advancement is measured by coherence and competence with cosmic and divine law, acting in concert with free will and individual soul paths, so how much a society actually nurtures the individual in their growth and development, and the harmony that that society has with the beings in that society, but also all life in the environment, in the local ecology. So human beings at our stage of development, we're in a pre-space age epoch right now. And we will one day take our role in the cosmic scheme of evolution, which we're going to learn about today. So all ET groups, either explicitly or via implication of behavior, acknowledge the existence of an all-encompassing creator personality. So one of the things that's interesting is that in analyzing these ET cultures and information, I found that almost all of them have this concept of a creator. And if you compare all of the ways that they describe the creator, there's some really good correspondences or harmonies that come from this. We're going to learn about that because it's going to help us in understanding what we as individuals, as change agents, can actually do to play our part in not only the cosmic evolution, but actually just making the world a better place. So in part 2, we're going to talk about creator-creature relationship and the spiritual hierarchy. So the creator-creature mandate and mission. So in ET mythologies and philosophies assert that all personality, consciousness, and beingness itself emerges from a creator of all things. The creator always creates with purpose, and as such, all beings have a purpose that is supported and nurtured by the creator and what are called deity personalities. So the one commandment that the creator issues to the creature, and this is obviously echoed in the Bible, it comes from the Urantia Book, but it's also implied in a lot of the contact material, is to be you perfect, even as I being the creator, is perfect. So the creator made the creation for the purpose of experiencing its own perfection by living within the creation as a creature, amongst other unrevealed things. So what is this quest for perfection? Well, the creature's purpose is to try to be perfect through the playground of or stage of experience via the pursuit of something called self-mastery. So life provides the lesson plan, and we face challenges in the process, which distills true knowledge and wisdom. So every time you face a challenge, every time you overcome a personal hurdle, every time you repair a relationship, you set a grudge aside, you're actually doing the work of the cosmos and the universe and making the world a better place. So the ultimate goal of this scheme is to find the creator, the source of wisdom and the blueprint for creature and societal perfection. Yet since the creator is infinite and the creature and society are finite, the actual scheme of evolution is unending. It's an endless ascension and growth. So basically it's kind of like this endless, amazing adventure where we all get to continually ascend and grow and evolve, and it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. So each culture and individual possesses or progresses through various levels of universal advancement by mastering the challenges in their environment. So this is really important to understand. These challenges that we're facing right now, especially in this time of, we're in this awakening, we've got the age of information here, arguably the apocalypse has already happened, that creates a lot of things that got to get fixed and solved and whatnot. Well, all of this is here to help us, and it's all part of this grand purpose. So this hardship provides us the raw material we need to grow and learn. So you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, it sounds like you're promoting perfectionism. That's not what I'm promoting, everybody. I'm promoting self-mastery. And there's a key difference. A perfectionist rejects anything but perfection of outcome, while the student of self-mastery recognizes the process is more important than the outcome. So it's a process-centric philosophy. So self-mastery is the quest for truth and the application of it to distill wisdom. This requires self-reflection and humility, the ability to appreciate your mistakes as a source of greater wisdom. So clearly, you can't be a perfectionist and also pursue self-mastery, because you're going to constantly want to look at what's happening in your life to assess it and see what wisdom you can pull out of that by learning and thinking about things. So social mastery is achieved through the individual heeding the call to be moral. So that's what these moral laws are for. They're enforced by creator-minded creatures, so-called effects of Christ consciousness. So we've all heard of the Christ consciousness before, right? So what does that actually mean? Well, we're going to look into that today. But basically the key point here is that unlike the normal laws of creation, which kind of happen automatically, the natural laws, moral law is something that we have to embody. And that's part of what we're trying to do here. So the creator is a service to other personality. So therefore, the cosmos and the scheme of universal and eternal evolution is one of the loving, benevolent service. Creatures learn to serve better through understanding and living out the laws of morality. So what is the organization of the cultural hierarchy? Well, all ET and human cultures can be measured as a function of that culture's capacity to work with the laws of creation and participate in the Creator's plan of the cosmos. So that's how we're going to order them or categorize to form this hierarchy that's described by ET cultures. So the Creator serves to other, as such, the principle of correspondence, fractality is at work. The cosmos is biased towards service to other advancement. And this can be proven by analyzing the laws of existence, especially moral laws and how they're enforced. So we can actually look at our own life experience and we can see that by being good to each other, by communicating clearly with each other, by forming clear, honest agreements, things like that, so we actually do create better social harmony. And this social harmony is what helps us realize a better world each progressing day. So according to the law of one, the cosmos is organized within densities of consciousness wherein certain specific spiritual goals are individually and culturally explored and attained. So now we're going to go through the 7 densities. So these densities scheme that I've placed in here, this comes from the law of one, it's called a taxonomy. Anybody know what a taxonomy is? Nice. So a taxonomy is basically just an arbitrary way of categorizing something. It's a way of thinking about things so we can better understand what's happening. So this is the law of one taxonomy. There's many different ways to think about this. So the first through second density is largely unconscious, where the individual evolves as a seeming automatic feature of experience. So third density is where the individual begins to consciously direct their path, choosing either service to others or service to self modalities. That's where we're at. We're on a world like that. On these unaffiliated worlds, individuals and social groups battle with each other, eventually resulting in one modality completely overtaking the other. And this is influenced through the ministry that comes from fourth and fifth density cultures. So fourth and fifth density is where the two paths of service to other and service to self bifurcate or quantize, providing a congruent social and political environment for each individual to maximize their chosen path. So what that means is that the big difference between third density and fourth density, or fifth density, is that third density is where we're all kind of coming together. We're having basically a big discussion about what kind of philosophy do we want this world that we're going to be inheriting to embody. And once we go through that debate and that warring, so to speak, then there's actually a split that happens. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that later. So these worlds, the fourth and fifth density worlds, are tasked with missionary work. So that's a missionary work, if you're not familiar with that term. It refers to people going out and trying to help provide assistance, philosophy, counseling, healing, things like this. And they reach out to unaffiliated worlds, offering their knowledge, depending on what is sought after. So we're going to call these fourth and fifth density groups custodian groups. So sixth through seventh density is where unity occurs. So this is where the service to self and service to other path reconcile. Because there's no other place the service to self can go. At certain points in the universal scheme of evolution, being service to self only gets you so far, and then you kind of got to, set aside that philosophy and move to a more service to others philosophy. So this is where guardian groups oversee the evolutionary ministry of the preceding densities. So the guardian groups, how many people are familiar with Corey Goode's material? Anybody here? Oh, great, okay. So the blue avians, those are guardian groups. They don't directly interact with humanity. In this instance, they are, and we're going to get into why they do that. But they do their ministry to the fourth and fifth density groups, and those groups minister directly to us. So warring between groups is sanctioned and supported indirectly by guardian groups that are tasked with protecting the rights of all beings in their purview. Intervention only occurs when one group violates the rights of another, and no resolution can be brokered by the affected parties after a period of delayed justice, which is called mercy. So again, because controversy and the way that we solve our problems as people is actually the foundation for creating greater forms of social harmony, the universe basically allows us to have very heated debates with each other, for lack of a better term. And in the beginning of this evolutionary epoch, it can get really intense. Obviously, there can be actual violence involved. But as the transition moves forward, then the violence is reduced, and we're going to get into that more. So there's a reason why they allow this to happen. You might be asking yourself, well, why would the guardian groups, why would the creators allow us to fight each other? I mean, that seems kind of counterproductive. Well, we need to, because we are free will creatures. We have to have the ability to work out our own problems. And in the process, we learn how to perfect our understanding of moral law. We actually create institutions and facilities and educational platforms where we can understand how to better serve each other. So service-to-self cultures, while seemingly working against the divine plan of creation, are actually carrying out their creator-creature mandates within the allotted domain of their choice. So what that basically means is that the service-to-self path is a viable path up to a certain point, but then it breaks off and you have to choose another path. So what is the purpose of third density? Hold on 1 second, let me just take a sip of water here. Well, the purpose of third density is the effects of the service-to-self path, on worlds, third density worlds, the effects of the service-to-self path, such as tyranny, oppression, trauma, mind control, deleterious technologies, all these things we could list on forever. They actually provide opportunities of growth for the service to others. And then conversely, the things that the service to other group does works to provide opportunities of growth to the service of self path. So on these third density worlds where we're all kind of hanging out and partying with each other, we actually mingle and provide opportunities for growth in either respect. So how does this start off? Well, for ages of time, these two archetypal philosophic paths war against each other until through self-mastery and social harmony advancements, one path overtakes the other. So because the service to self and service to other paths are so abstract, there's actually got to be an articulation of the knowledge and the wisdom that comes through pursuing them. And that grows in strength and coherence. So there is a lawful aspect in the sense that the service to self and service to other philosophy are principles, but we actually, because we're creators, we actually get to choose how we want to create the world in which that philosophy is embodied. And that's what we're learning how to do now. So that's where it becomes a creative enterprise. It's not just us blindly following something handed down to us from heaven. So let's see here. Both groups use various methods to make contact with missionaries from 4th and 5th density groups, or even higher. So these missionaries, remember, they're on 4th and 5th density worlds. So they might be the Pleiadians, they might be the Ra group, which are more the Guardians at the time. They might be the Octorians. I mean, there's dozens of ET groups out there, and they all interact with us at various levels. So the missionaries attempt to persuade the evolving third density humans towards either the service to self or service to others path. And in this way, these 4th and 5th density worlds war against each other via the battlefield of consciousness and the hearts and minds of third density beings. So these 4th and 5th density groups are themselves trying to pursue their own path. They're trying to get better at whatever they're choosing to do. And they use, quote unquote, us as ways to promulgate that agenda for themselves. But they're also helping. It's not just like a use thing. So as each third density faction gains wisdom, their ability to exercise influence and power over the other groups increases. So obviously, you know, if you're service to self, you're going to get better at doing the whole service to self thing as time goes on. Makes sense, right? The same thing with the service to others path. So wisdom and knowledge are distilled through facing the challenges as these groups war against each other. And once a world is biased towards either service to other or service to self in enough density or coherence, then the whole planetary consciousness activates, and now there's a new epoch of evolution that proceeds. So all third density spheres eventually form global governance, unity through the quest for perfection related to service to self or service to others. So the whole idea of a one world government is, you know, who's ever heard of the New World Order? Probably a lot of people, right? Okay. Well, that's the service to self group. That's the service to self camp trying to create a global governance system through tyranny, through oppression, through belittling the individual and trying to rob them of their rights. I mean, that's the way this stuff works, and I wish I had more time to get into that, but there's another path that we're trying to live out, which is obviously the service to others path. Who's on the service to others path? Can you show hands? All right, I figured as much, kind of preaching to the choir here. All right, so presently we're in the initial stages of this culmination event. So you all have heard about the ascension and things like this. This is part of what this process is. So this is the spiritual hierarchy. So personality attainment and social harmony are the ultimate measures of spiritual progress. So personality attainment refers to how much wisdom you've accumulated as an individual, and then that translates into how much social harmony you have with other people. And it specifically relates to, as a good measure, how well a creature exercises their rights without infringing on the rights of somebody else. That is really like the main punchline behind how this works. So if you're in a service to self capacity, they're constantly infringing on your rights, right? They're constantly taking things away from you. They're trying to take you away from learning about what you want to learn about, eating clean food, having clean skies, you know, things like this. Those are rights that are being infringed through their pursuit of their agenda. So ascension itself is a concept founded on hierarchy. A hierarchy based on wisdom and responsibility that comes from personal power. So I know hierarchy is kind of like a little dirty word right now, but there is a good use to this term, and we're going to learn more about it. So this is the hierarchy as presented by various ET cultures and groups. So we have the creator at the top. Then we have what are called deity personalities. Those are existentially or evolutionary beings who have attained perfection and evolved so much in consciousness that they can actually act as agents of the divine. So these particular personalities are indistinguishable from the creator in character and ministry. So they're obviously not the creator, but they've evolved so much in tune with the creator that when you see them, it's essentially as if you're seeing an aspect of the creator. So guardian groups, this is the group below the deity personalities, they work directly with the creator and the persons of deity to watch over and minister to the evolving races of time and space. We have the helper groups, which are service to other groups that work with the lower evolving races, and they try to persuade us towards a benevolent future. The manipulator groups, they're doing the opposite. They're trying to persuade us towards a malevolent cultural association. And then we have the unaffiliated worlds. That's us. We're in the process of figuring out what we want to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about hierarchy. So the term hierarchy is usually regarded as negative, and some most definitely aren't fair. But in general, hierarchy is a system for categorizing a group via ranking based on attainment measured by some qualifier. So hierarchy isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a tool you can use to our advantage. So due to the nature of skill and attainment, socially an individual who has more skill than another is considered higher in that respect. But as individuals, all beings have the same inherent spiritual potential. All are equal in spiritual opportunity. Despite that, people really do have different levels of wisdom attainment. So obviously, the person who's been learning to play guitar for 30 years knows a little bit more about the guitar than the person who hasn't played any at all, right? Makes sense. And because of that varying levels of skill, there's differentials of where that person sits based on musical acumen. So all beings are equally loved, supported, and nurtured by the universe, but only those who have chosen to follow the will of creation, who strive to self-mastery, can climb the cosmic ladder towards perfection of personality. So this is a choice. Evolution isn't something automatic that just happens. It is for a little while in first and second density. But then in third density, you have to actually choose to evolve. It's your choice. That's one of the reasons why free will is so paramount. So attempting to downplay or remove hierarchy robs the individual of direction. The very idea of evolution essentially immediately presupposes the existence of different levels of attainment, which is a hierarchy. So the individual focus should be on what you can do to master yourself, regardless of where other people are in their evolution. So personality evolution is self-centered in process, but altruistic in expression. So now we're going to talk about the purposes and attributes and plans of the Creator. So we're going to describe about what some of the Creator is and in relation to some of the way these ET cultures see the Creator. Some of this information is just clear and explicit, like in the Law of One material, in the Seth material, in the Urantia Book especially. Some of it's implied through the way they describe and act in the universe. But essentially this is a congruent synthesis of how a lot of these ET cultures see things, especially the Creator. So the Creator is the first source and center of all life and consciousness. It created the universe, the setting, and the rules for personality evolution, and consciousness itself. So this is the venue where the creature actually can become perfect. So the Creator is the ultimate transcendent personality, which is infinite in scope, power, and influence, as well as eternal in consistency, purpose, and ministry. So to the creature, the Creator is the raw and personal aspects of existence, which the Urantia Book calls the unqualified absolute, as well as the meta blueprint of person. So this is one of the reasons why it's somewhat paradoxical. The Creator is not only the all-perfect Creator that got everything started, but it's also the thing being perfected in the creation, as well as the creature doing the perfection work. So it's all those things at once. And that's why it's a paradoxical situation. That's why it's called a transcendent personality. So to seek for the Creator and to strive to follow their will is the ultimate calling, the highest aspiration, the quickest and surest way to a deep and meaningful, progressively evolving and enlightening life. This is something that is echoed in almost every ET culture that I've researched for this presentation, as they all seem to underscore that principle deeply. So what we're going to do now is talk about some of the tools that you as creatures, as you as beings, actually get to evolve your path. And we're going to get into some lawful concepts here. So the Creator has a plan for the creation. The universe was made for a purpose. The creature is part of that purpose, endowed with rights that allow them to live out their unique purpose. So what are rights? Well, rights are things that we're allowed or encouraged to do that come with rules. The rules that govern rights are called responsibilities, obligations. So spiritual rights come with moral obligations, spiritual duties. So as creatures, we have divine rights, which is the source of all rights. And our responsibility or obligations to use those rights is honor and respect the rights of all other beings. When we dishonor others, justice serves as the mechanism for restoring social harmony and personal honor. So that's what justice is supposed to be. I know in our world it's like, really corrupt. There's a lot of problems, believe me, I know. But as an institution, as an idea, as a principle, justice is meant to help us form better social harmony. We face internal challenges. When we do something wrong, we have to go and look at the situation and be like, wait a minute, what did I do? Let me see if I can figure out a way to resolve the situation with somebody, and then in the act of doing so, we restore those energetic cords. So what does cosmic and earthly justice look like? So how do we actually make this justice? What does it look like from a creator or creature perspective? And so we can embody this in what we're trying to do for our world. Well, knowledge is the tool the creature uses to exercise their rights, which gives them power to act in the world. So you might have a right to make a painting, but obviously you got to have some knowledge to do something with it, right? So it's the same for all types of rights. Because all actions of will creatures are causes that have universal effects, so every time we do something, those effects ripple out, right? Ripple out in eternity, just like from the Gladiator movie. All beings have a responsibility to all others. So basically what that means is that we're all engaged in a massive spiritual contract or covenant with each other. And this is a lawful relationship with karmic connection. So divine mercy acts as a time lag for the creature who violates the rights of others. And this gives them a chance to participate in justice. So justice is a social process for providing the creature an opportunity to take responsibility for accidental or intentional harm against another, which is the violation of their rights. Anytime you're causing harm to somebody, you're violating one of their rights. So by understanding what the implicit rights are that every individual has, you can better direct your consciousness in how to create social harmony with your actions. So what happens when you violate somebody's rights? Well, when somebody fails to honor justice, the individual suffers negative karma. So in other words, what that means is if you did somebody some wrong, or if somebody did some wrong to you, and they don't willingly of their own free will come to try to resolve the situation, well, they're going to suffer some negative karma, and that's kind of nudge them back on the path, so to speak. So because of all this, because of the way that the rights work, so remember, moral laws, they're not enforced by the Creator. We as creatures enforce them. Because of this, the Creator does not intervene directly in the creation. The creature intervenes, and this is in relation to justice, the creature intervenes via their choice to do the will of creation, to embody living justice. So the Creator established the system of rights and morality itself. So in the act of effecting justice, the creature gains mastery, so we actually learn to be better people, and the universe is harmonized. We're actually creating the social harmony, which is what part of the plan of creation. So the Creator's plan and purpose is carried out when we as creatures of our own free will resolve our differences and form harmony to social action. I think that's exactly what's happening at this conference, guys. I mean, we're all here, we come here with our own inspired desires, our own visions, our own purposes, and then we start to have conversations with each other. We figure out how we align with each other. Do we have similar values? How can we work together? That's where the magic happens. So give you all a pat on the back. So, all beings are all beings are responsible for playing their part in the divine plan. So, to obviously seek the truth and master yourself through the quest for perfection, to honor the rights of and the free will of others, and to engage in justice so as to perfect the self and manifestation of social harmony. So the divine purpose of creation at this stage, because it actually is evolving and changes, is to provide for the mastery of the individual and the harmonization of all life. Now this is what's really interesting. As individuals master themselves and social harmony forms, new life and opportunities actually come onto the scene. So a really good example of this is your own body. Your own body is a tapestry of trillions of cells. I think the last estimate I saw was about 34 trillion cells. All of those cells biologically worked together over billions of years, slowly forming a beautiful social harmony with each other. A harmony so perfect that your soul can actually come in and indwell that body and carry out some new aspect of the creation. So that's kind of like the meta blueprint for how the creation actually works. That's what we're about to go through right now as we shift into fourth density, is we're learning how to be the cells of Gaia, so to speak, and then through the harmony that we're creating through each other, a new personality, a new consciousness actually is going to come online and start to work with us. So, since the Creator is the source of all wisdom and social harmony, the creature's search for the Creator is foundational to carrying out the divine purpose. So, although I'm not trying to convince anybody of any particular viewpoints on the Creator, I will say from a philosophical perspective that the concept, the idea of the Creator is incredibly powerful. It seems to act as like an anchoring force where all of these other concepts, eventually through your search for wisdom and knowledge, they all start to kind of connect with each other. So when you can make contact with that idea of the Creator, you've really got an amazing foundation for how you can harmonize all sorts of other information and knowledge. So what is the role of law? Well, I know law sounds pretty boring and dull to probably most of you, but it's actually really important. The Creator's will is eternally and universally consistent. The habits of the Creator are what the creature perceives as divine, cosmic, or universal law. So a lot of laws of creation are universally fair and perfect for all situations, times, and places. So basically what we're getting at here is that the Creator's will is eternal and consistent, and because of that, it appears to us as law. So literally, when we understand law, it's as if we're making direct contact with the Creator's will, which, given everything else that was discussed here within the ET philosophy, it's crucial to what we're trying to do. So since all creatures have inalienable rights endowed by the Creator, a system for managing these rights was also created. The system is law itself. The rules that govern the universe are inherently fair and perfectly maintained, specifically so that each being has the best chance for personality growth and attainment. So what this means is, from the divine viewpoint, from the Creator's viewpoint, you could say, all beings always, without fail, are offered the best opportunities for their growth and development. So that means all of the challenges, like we were talking about earlier, all the challenges you have to face in your life, you're like, man, what am I dealing with all this for? Well, it's because it's nudging you, it's helping you grow in some way. And obviously you don't have to do this alone. We do it together, and many hands make a light work, right? So by mastering social interaction with other free will beings, and this happens through the wisdom of honorable contracts, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, the creature accepts their spiritual responsibility and obligation to the creation. This is how the purpose of creation is actualized, related to creature perfection. So law is defined as a system of rules that govern the interaction of things and beings. Law is objective, in an objective sense, is immutable. It operates without our interaction. So the laws of gravity, the laws of electromagnetism, the laws of information transference, like entrainment and wave properties and things like this. We don't have to think or do anything. They just kind of happen automatically, right? Well, excuse me here. Right. So, but the laws of morality, these are actually something that we have to breathe life into. So the way that the rights are conveyed to an individual is through prior incarnation process. So in between lives, you could say, or at the moment when you actually were created as a personality, you were given these rights. And as a way of accepting these rights, we have to accept our responsibility. And in law, the purpose of an oath is to demonstrate that you are of sound mind and body, and that you know what your rights and responsibilities are, and you're capable of living in accordance with them. At least you're going to strive to do that. So that's how you actually accept rights. So law in a subjective sense, so this is like moral laws, is a statement of fact, a conscious recognition of abstract knowledge recorded in the mind, which an individual uses to guide their actions. So whether or not we're talking about moral laws or we're talking about laws of nature, when you understand what a law is, it actually shapes your behavior. So a good example of this is gravity. When you're walking, your body is so implicitly understanding of the laws of gravity that every time you walk, you just know that you're going to have your feet go one foot in front of the other. That's a really good example of that. So subjective laws are enforced through creature participation. So why is the world such a horrible place? Well, it's because we're trying to figure it out. We have to actually figure out what these moral laws are and then learn how to use them together in harmony and unity. And then as a result of that, the world becomes a better place. And again, this is how the Creator intervenes in the creation through moralities, because we as beings of the Creator actually heed that call and then live out that purpose of making the world a better place. So how is law discovered? Well, knowledge of law emerges from truth arguments, sourced from mysticism, science, and philosophy. So although the laws of existence do not change, an individual society's comprehension of laws evolves through discovery and application. So what's a truth argument? Well, a truth argument describes what something is, that something exists. And then what a value argument does, it describes what somebody or a group of people should do given that something exists. So a really good example of this is a Contact in the Desert event. Can we make a case that there is an event called Contact in the Desert happening right now? Well, probably, right? You guys are all sitting here listening to me talk. You have heard other people talk, right? So we can agree that that truth exists, right? But then how are you, depending on that truth, going to guide your behavior? Well, that's your choice. This is where the idea of values come in. Maybe you want to see somebody speak over another person. So then because you value that whatever's embodied in that knowledge, you direct your behavior accordingly. So what the legal system is a product of truth and value arguments. So we have these, in the legal system, or the law, we have these things called rights. Everybody has them, they're like inalienable rights. Okay, well given that we all agree that that thing called rights exists, how are we going to manage this? What are we going to do with that? That's what the legal system is. And obviously it's very imperfect right now, but when we participate in this process, we can make it better. So justice is evolutionary in that human beings become better and wiser embodiments of law, the Creator's will, via the trials of experience, the settling of controversy. So justice is the only way for a society, not an individual, to ascend to higher levels of spiritual attainment, which is the ultimate measure of social progress. So that's what, in order for us to help this social harmony progress forward, we each have to try in our own way, shape, and form, in our own, moderation, that kind of thing, try to actually learn this information and become master. So we're going to go through the densities in the spiritual hierarchy again and see how all these groups work together, because they use a tapestry of law. Remember, each being has rights. So how are these rights going to be managed? Well, it happens through this hierarchy that I'm about to describe. So the deity personalities were created in the beginning when there was nothing else but the Creator. And the Creator, as we described in this primordial state, is an infinitely perfect, harmonious reality, like a singularity. So in the creation, the Creator is manifest in the persons of deity as a trinity of fathership, mothership, and sonship. So the Creator is constantly delegating to creatures to carry out the divine will. So what that means is that anything that the Creator could give to a creature to do as far as the divine plan, it seems to do that. We don't exactly know why, but this is what a lot of the ET cultures seem to describe, and that's why there are such things as guardian groups and ministering personalities, is because they've learned and evolved in their own respect, and now they get to actually embody that and teach it to other people. So what is a deity? Well, a deity is a being that was created perfect or evolved to the state of perfection wherein they can represent the fullness of the Creator in some respect. So these beings in particular, because of how close they are to Creator, you could argue, they're really good administrators. And an administrator is somebody that coordinates various things and operations, particularly in related to creature rights. So we each have these spiritual rights. Well, who's going to help us make sure that our rights are maintained? Well, as human beings, we try to do that for each other, right? But in a grand cosmic sense, there's literally whole groups of beings that help us in managing our rights. So in the beginning, the Creator begat the three persons of deity, and the Urantia Book describes these three persons as the universal Father, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit. And then these beings begat other beings of deity status. So there's like whole hosts of these beings up there, really close up to the Creator, that have been managing things. I mean, according to the Urantia Book, some of these universes have been around for trillions upon trillions of years. I mean, really long periods of time, mind-boggling. So the creation is managed by the deity personalities who act on behalf of the Creator, but specifically, the personalities act as authorities over the evolutionary races. So in all of these different places in the cosmos, there's like a representative, an agent of the Creator that kind of acts as like the embodiment of the Creator, that these other evolutionary groups who come up from their status as creatures eventually make contact with, and then there's the Creator and the creature actually government, you could say, that is slowly coalescing and coming together. So the guardian groups are directly below the deity personalities. So the guardian groups work directly with the Creator through the deity personalities, and they help manage the evolutionary worlds of time and space. The guardian groups in the Law of One model act as custodians over the lower densities. So this is the lower 6th through 1st. And they act through the persons of 4th and 5th density as custodian agents. So in most cases, and in certain times when the custodian groups aren't really doing what they're supposed to be doing, the guardian groups come in and intervene. But in most instances, they delegate certain tasks and functions to these custodian groups. So they offer, the guardian groups offer guidance and counsel to the lower groups, but they do not directly intervene, unless a demonstration of honor, a dereliction of contractual duties. So when a 4th or 5th density group kind of breaks the rules, they're stepping out of the line, something like that, the guardian groups will give them a chance to kind of, you know, see their ways, and then if they don't, then they'll come in and they'll actually start intervening. And arguably, what's happening on Earth over the past, 100 years at the very least, has been some type of guardian intervention. That's why I mentioned Corey's material. He's basically representing, his narrative is all about how these guardian groups, the Sphere Being Alliance, came in and started intervening directly in human affairs through Corey, and then through, the custodian group, for example, is the Anshar. The Anshar are supposedly 4th and 5th density, or 4th density culture of human beings. So they work to minister to us, as they have done. And when they get out of line, then the guardian groups have to come in and kind of, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So they also act according to the Law of One material and several other sources as watching over the incarnation process. So the guardian groups are kind of like the angels. They make sure that your soul gets to the right body and the right family and things like this. So the guardian groups have attained social harmony to such an extent that they speak in social harmony. So when you speak to one individual guardian, so one individual being, it's as if you're speaking to the whole race. So it kind of appears like a hive mind type of situation, but according to some of this material, that's not actually the case. The guardian groups aren't a hive mind race. What they actually are is individuals. So they do possess individuality, but they've achieved such an amazing level of social harmony that it's like speaking to the whole race. And your body's a pretty good example of that, right? Your body's highly organized and harmonized, and yet we have different individual aspects of our body and our cells. So these are the helper and manipulator groups. During the 4th and 5th density adventure, races explore two polarities of personnel and social evolution known as a service to others and service to self paths. So helper groups are service to other, whereas the manipulator groups are service to self, both advance by sharing their wisdom. So these groups are custodian. So the reason we call them custodian is that they've earned the right to minister to lesser groups, but they have to follow a non-interference policy, the so-called prime directive. They are required to honor our free will and cosmic law, and if they don't, they get in trouble with these guardian groups. So what are some of the techniques of these custodian groups? How do they actually interact with us? Well, the helper groups, they have the goal of assisting lesser life forms in evolving through self-mastery teaching. So that's why in a lot of this benevolent channeling material, contact material, you hear a lot about, things we can do as individuals to either meditate more, eat healthier, better work with each other, and so forming social relationships, things like this. They offer generally philosophy and technical knowledge, and in some cases they actually offer material assistance, so they actually give us aid, material aid. So manipulator groups, they're service to self, and their goal is to indoctrinate lesser life forms into their scheme of social evolution, which basically forms a parasitic relationship. Now the service to self groups are parasitic in nature, but they still do provide wisdom. They still do provide knowledge. So even though they're parasitic, there is actually an exchange happening there. So what are some examples of groups that we have on the Earth that we can look to that might have been interacting with some of these 5th and 4th and 5th density groups? Well, the Cabal or Illuminati, they're a great example. They make direct and indirect contact with service to self groups through various methods like channeling, torture, trauma-based mind control, things like this, ritual, traumatic ritual, as well as direct physical contact. So there's a reason why, this is kind of a dark subject, but there's a reason why these Cabal groups engage in, torture and things like this. Is because when you torture somebody, that causes a dissociation of their mind, and then an alter personality forms where another entity can actually come in and speak through that being. And that's one of the reasons why they do this kind of activity. So they are actually making contact with some of these groups. So what are some of the light workers doing? Well, we make direct contacts through channeling, intuition, synchronicity, mysticism, and then we also make direct physical contact. So has anybody actually had a contact experience before? Can you show it? Yeah. Show of hands. Would you say it was benevolent, or? Okay, so you were probably making contact with a benevolent personality. And the goal of the light workers, of course, is we want to create a symbiotic relationship. So unlike the service to self groups, the higher density groups that are kind of basically trying to parasitically use us, these other helper groups are trying to create a genuine bona fide de jure alliance with us. So what is their authority? Where do they actually get their authority to do this? Well, helper and manipulator groups are authorized by the guardian groups, who are in turn authorized by the Creator through the persons of deity, for the purpose of ministering directly to the evolutionary worlds of time and space. So this is sanctioned. This isn't like an accident that happens. This is built into the scheme of creation according to some of these E2 groups. As long as these custodian groups honor their contractual duties, they'll maintain lawful authority. And then when they don't, then they have intervention. And as I mentioned, the Draco, for those of you familiar with Corey Good's material, they dishonored their duty. They were supposed to minister in a certain capacity. They stopped doing that, arguably thousands of years ago. And because of that, there was a dispensation of mercy, or the guardian groups gave the Draco a chance to kind of come around and say, hey guys, stop doing what you're doing. But now the time's up. Now we're in adjudication phase. So both guardian and custodian groups participate in cosmic social harmony by forming alliances with other groups. So they actually work together, just like we're trying to work together here on Earth. If a group, an extraterrestrial culture, has some purpose or goal, and they want to pursue that goal forward, if they have similar values, and they're going to form an alliance. So now we're going to focus on unaffiliated worlds. So basically at this point of the talk, now we're going to focus specifically on kind of like where we're at in the human scheme of things, given all of the context I just offered. So cultures that have yet to harmonize around a chosen path of service are unaffiliated. Most unaffiliated cultures exist on third density worlds due to the fact individuals are still engaged in the adventure of discovering their chosen path. Individuals slowly gain self-mastery through pursuit of truth. So seeking the truth is the technique for developing self-mastery. Eventually, the truth of a moral philosophy is discovered. The service to self or service to other path. And these moral social philosophies have value arguments that recognize common truths, founded on truth arguments. So basically what I'm saying is that there is a correlation between service to self and service to other. What is that correlation? Well, the common truth is that other individuals exist in the creation. We're not alone here. There's other people here, other beings. And in order for the individual and the group to manifest their desires, they have to work together. So in order for us to exercise our rights, in order for us to express our values and form desires, you have to work with other people. That's just built into the fabric of reality itself, and that's common for both service to self and service to other. So what are some service to self characteristics? Well, service to self philosophies discount the value of others, placing the self at a superior position. So it's a dark Luciferian satanic philosophy where the ego is basically exalted as the highest thing to pursue. So socially, this philosophy manifests as in-group and out-group structures of elitism, such as injustice, prejudice, tyranny, and censorship, often founded on inherent superiority doctrines like bloodlines, race, or cultural mythos and social status. So basically what we're talking about here is that an in-group and an out-group dynamic is the elite will say, well, we have the divine right to rule because, you know, either I have a bloodline or I have this belief system that my family's been using for thousands of years, and because of this, we have the divine right to rule, and you can't, no matter how hard you try to climb up the ladder, you can't if you don't have the bloodline, right? I mean, look at the people who are kings and queens all over the world, the monarchies. Doesn't matter how good you are doing something, there's no hope for you to get into that. That's a service to self hierarchy. That's a service to self agenda right there. So economically, the fruits of labor, innovation, enterprise are first distributed to the elite, while the rest enjoy second citizen status. So this philosophy, as it manifests in the world, it creates massive economic disparities. We got most of the population. I think the last statistic I saw was that the top 1%, or no, the top 1% of the 1%ers have more wealth than like half the population combined. I mean, that's a staggering economic disparity right there. So technological advancement is held back for the purpose of economic control. A good example of that's big oil. So the service to self groups, they actually try to hold progress back. And they also create technologies specifically for the purpose of controlling people. So, I mean, I could list those off, and I'm sure everybody's very familiar with that here, but basically the point of control is to try to create a technology that robs an individual of their growth. So it creates a kind of codependent technology. A good example of this is GPS systems. I mean, when I was going to high school back in the 90s, I had to like use a map to figure out where I wanted to go. I had to ask somebody for directions. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Okay. Now, if you had to get somewhere, how likely are you to figure it out on your own without the GPS? Pretty small, right? It's pretty challenging. Well, that's one of these codependent technologies. We're dependent on the cabal and their GPS systems to navigate around in our world. And this is just one example. So this is why the use of technology, we have to really be careful about how we form our technologies. Are we going to create technologies that enhance soul purpose and soul challenge and allow us to develop mastery, or are we going to do stuff that takes it away? So some examples of service to self on the earth are dark Luciferianism, Satanism, the Setian order, dark occultism. These are esoteric in nature, so this is what the elite actually engage in themselves, although there are public variants of this. So we also have what are a little bit more surreptitiously or hidden dark philosophies out there. One of them is postmodernism. One of them is solipsism. Both of those are founded on the fact that there is no objective truth, which is kind of a problem, I would think. Materialistic consumerism, that's a pretty easy one. Nihilism, the belief that there's no meaning in the universe, everything's meaningless. Well, if everything's meaningless, then there's no right or wrong, there's no morality. If you can just do whatever you want, it's all a power struggle at that point. And whole swaths of the population have been indoctrinated into a nihilistic view of the world. And what this does is it promotes slave culture, basically. It's a form of spiritual entrapment for the purpose of harvesting energy, information, creative power, all this from the individual. So society at large is slowly forced to accept exoteric forms of service to self ideology, so-called mini-me Satanism, according to Mark Passio, which serves as a recruitment mechanism for the elite as well as a defensive measure against opposing philosophies. And this is something when I discovered this whole idea of negative philosophies surreptitiously, incepted into our culture, it seemed really radical. But when you actually sit down and you read what some of these precepts of Satanism are, and then you look at the way advertisements are formed, for example, indulgence is one of these really big virtues in Satanism, being able to take whatever you want and just keep grabbing more and more and more. How many times have you heard the word indulgence in an advertisement? See a show of hands. Like, all the time, right? Yeah. So we're constantly being carefully manipulated through some of these philosophies, and this is why developing your own philosophy, thinking for yourself, is critically important. So at present, cultural trends indicate a push towards service to self-style society, as promoted by the most influential groups of the self-serving elite. So our world they're really trying hard to make it service to self. And arguably, I gotta hand it to them, they've done a pretty darn good job of it. But despite all that work, we're still here. We don't want the service to self philosophy, am I right? Right. So one of the big differences between the service to self and the service to other agenda is that because this struggle has been happening for thousands of years, the service to self agenda has been really good at divide and conquer. It's really hard for the service to other people at this stage of development to find common unity and work together. So this is something I'm really passionate about, because I know at the core, most people who subscribe to the service to other agenda have the same values. We all kind of want the same thing, don't we? So now the challenge is, how are we going to work together to realize this? And the bottom line is the universe supports coherence. It supports the group that works well together through unity. That's why we, as individuals who subscribe to the service to other path, would do well to really try to work hard to overcome these challenges, because we don't want the world to go to these service to self people, do we? No. I certainly don't. All right, so what are some service to others characteristics? Well, the service to others philosophy recognizes and reveres the inherent spiritual value of others. The self and the other self are equal. So instead of having a duality of hierarchy, then there's each individual is seen as basically equal with each other. The individual is sovereign. This is a fairly new concept, for at least as far as I've discovered, that was introduced in the Enlightenment. And their rights are protected and revered by all as a founding principle of social harmony. So this is what ideally we want to strive towards in embodying a service to self, or excuse me, service to other kind of a world of philosophy. So socially, this philosophy manifests as altruism, tolerance, social custodianship, which is true sovereignty, true justice, opportunities of prosperity for all. So economically, the fruits of labor are distributed to all based on some model of fair participation, merit-based rights, along with social support structures such as charity for those who have yet to discover their role in society. So in a service to others society, everybody gets the opportunity to live out their unique soul path. And obviously those who've really made progress in that, they produce a lot of things, right? Abundance just kind of flows everywhere. So when we each get the opportunity to master ourselves and start to work together more, then abundance is just a natural byproduct to that. So technological advancement is enhanced and propelled forward due to honest and open nature of social organizations. like open sourcing, these kind of things. This is part of the reason, I would argue that's part of a service to others type of philosophy. Since there's no need for technological suppression, the individual is seen as the source of cultural advancement, and technology is supportive of self-mastery, devoid of codependency. So I would argue in this particular area, we have some work to do, because it's a lot of the technology we use, I'm not so sure how good it is for us. I'm not a Luddite, I'm not saying we have to go back to, like plows and things like this. But what I am saying is that we really need to think about what the effects of this technology has on us. I love social media, I love being able to connect with a lot of people, but there's been a lot of studies that show that the way that we interact with each other online might not be all that beneficial. So we got to be really thinking about these things. So on Earth, some examples of service to other philosophies are secular humanism, which is an atheistic institution, but that is a forefront of kind of the way that rights can be managed potentially outside of a creator concept. We have altruistic religions and valid social service organizations. But for the most part, service to other advances have yet to take hold in a grand way due to our failure to unify as individuals. It's kind of a hard one to say, I know, but it's one of these things we're going to have to come to terms with. We have so much potential as individuals. I know, because I hear from so many of you all the time. I'm just blown away by how much inspiring information and work and healing and loving that y'all are doing out there. But we got to find a way to keep ramping it up a notch, because we're basically in a war right now. We're in an information war, and because of that, when we form unity, when we form the ability to actually work together in great harmony, we're going to serve much better in the grand scheme of things. So what is the purpose of unaffiliated worlds? Well, the purpose of this stage of evolution is to provide the individual the freedom of thought to choose their path, exploring using desires and values. So at this time, social cohesion forms around either a service to other or a service to self philosophy. Eventually, the wisdom of either path becomes a dominating influence that builds in momentum. So what we're basically talking about here is that these ideas are a naturally made contact. As individuals, you have some organic method of understanding the service to self and the service to other path. And then you choose which path you want to engage in, and then eventually become better and better at that. So the boundary or the arena where this process takes place is planetary. So these unaffiliated worlds, they're all playing on the same planetary playground, so to speak. This is due to the limits placed on resources, which forces individuals on to form social groups for individual survival and social progress. So because we only got one world to work with, and we're all trying to figure out our path, that kind of puts us in a pressure cooker, so to speak. We're having to figure out how to work with each other. So the planet and those that live on it are karmically or contractually linked, such that information from the unified global society qualifies the individual and the planet for ascension. So basically, because we are all karmically and contractually linked with each other, when we create this social harmony with each other, the whole planet's going to evolve with us, like I was mentioning earlier. Now, the other interesting thing is that usually unaffiliated worlds are quarantined. It can be quarantined for a number of reasons, but generally speaking, we have to be able to make our own choices as individuals. And if a highly advanced ET culture just popped up here and was flashing their technology around and things like this, we'd almost be distracted from our own purpose. That doesn't mean that these contacts don't happen. Of course they do. But on a grand scale, there's a reason why they're not just here with us at this point in time. So the service to self-aligned groups are using tyranny and violence to manifest their global society, which uses a might is right kind of axiom. Whereas service to other aligned groups use honorable communication, debate, discourse, and they discuss truth and value in forums for the purpose of exploring merit. So we're going to talk a little bit about merit here. So both philosophies employ the principle of merit as the persuading factor for social harmony. So what merit is it refers to the concept of practicality, the fact that something works. It has subjective value, it's seen as good, and it's desired. It's actually wanted with respect to some specific venture, claim, or subject matter. So when we talk about something having merit, if I offer you, I don't know, some fancy new phone that's going to last 100 years, would you say that that's valuable to you? Do you think that there's something that you would want with that? Does it make sense for you? Is it desired? That's what merit is. It's a merit argument right there. So in order for an idea, social policy, or venture to be seen as having merit, it has to be regarded as factually true and socially valuable. Thus, while truth guides the process of evolution, contractual agreement manifests cultural growth. So what that means is we might be able to recognize that something has merit, but because we're creatures of free will, we actually get to decide how that thing that we think has merit manifests in our world. So both groups advance their philosophy by claiming that their chosen body of knowledge is true and valuable, using either coercion, which is a service to self modality or technique, or honorable communication, which is service to other technique. So this is some of the ways that these groups work. So a really good example of the way they try to convince us to do things is through advertising. There's lots of subliminal messages, subtly encoded ideas in advertising. And they work kind of without your even conscious perception, so that before you know it, you're reaching for that box of bonbons or whatever the heck it is that they're trying to get you to eat. So that's a service to self modality right there. Service to others, do the reverse. They actually want you to think about, why is it valuable? Are you sure you really want to do this? That kind of thing. So both groups improve their philosophies by accumulating knowledge and wisdom through individual innovation. So this is basically like a philosophic arms race that takes place in which both groups learn how to better bolster their argument. Because again, this is a war of philosophy, you could say. It's about convincing other people that one philosophy is better than another. And they improve, each group improves on how they're going to actually do that. So how do these worlds evolve? So we're going to go through a little bit of a timeline of how these worlds evolve. Over ages of time, individuals advance their chosen philosophy and form social groups around mutually agreed upon values. So due to the fact that some service to self values are mutually exclusive to service to other values, they conflict with each other. Mutually exclusive means that they can't come together. There's something preventing them from being together. So both groups consider their competitive counterparts as lacking merit. So if you go to a service to self person and you say, hey, you know, you should really communicate more honestly and try to honor people's rights and things like this, they're going to say, that's not me, I'm doing something else. Right? And the reverse is true for service to other people. You know, if you go to somebody who's service to others and say, hey, you should really steal from that person, you should slander them, you should defame them so you can get your way, you're going to say, no, I don't want to have anything to do with that. So groups war with each other for survival and influence over the whole planet, and all groups resident thereon. So basically, not only are these service to other groups or service to self groups trying to maintain their own social status, but they're actually trying to influence other people who haven't made their choice yet. A really good example of that is religions. Religions are out there trying to do the missionary work, trying to tell people about the gospel, or you know, you have to believe in Buddha or Vishnu or whatever your chosen religion is. So, in particular relation to the Vatican, the papal bulls, has anybody read the Vatican papal bulls before? It's a harrowing read. If you ever get the chance, check it out. You'd be shocked. The papal bulls literally asserted that all living creatures must be subject to the Roman pontiff. So it's forced indoctrination. And they also asserted in the papal bulls that we're lunatics, dead, lost at sea, and basically like zombies running around, unable to manage and create social harmony. So they've created a justification that places us below them. Remember I was talking about before about the hierarchy of seeing people as two different sides, a duality. That's exactly it's literally written in their own documents. You can go read them yourself, I strongly encourage it. So in Earth history, religious wars emerged directly as a result of conflicting belief and value systems, resulting in conflict until one emerges as the winner, earning the right to proselytize their religion on the conquered people. And that's, I mean, if you look at the histories of religions, that's a pretty common trend with almost all of them. When groups can't engage in nonviolent debate, so ideas can be freely shared and considered, conflict is the only option to settle conceptual controversies. So remember, we're talking about ideas here. What is the basis of a disagreement? There's some type of an idea. If it's a material disagreement, maybe it's you think you have the right to take the car and your roommate's like, no, I have the right to take the car. Well, now you have to figure something out, right? Well, in the grand sense, anytime that there's two different ideas playing with each other in individuals, now there's a controversy. And if you don't figure out a way to talk to the other person to settle your differences, what ends up happening? It gets violent, it could get nasty, right? So that history is a tapestry of these type of things. So in later stages, conflicting ideas are debated using nonviolent means. This is basically where we're at right now. Conflict and hardship still occurs, but open war with respect to conflicting ideas becomes less likely, especially as technological advancement proceeds. So I mean, there's still a lot of wars happening. I'm not saying that there aren't, but in relation to the amount of bellicosity or the warlike behavior that was occurring in our deep past, it's somewhat lessened. On the service to self-aligned worlds, violent conflict and wholesale slaughter is replaced with mass mind control and indoctrination, as well as service to self or self-imposed population control measures, which a term I call auto-dysgenics. So in other words, instead of the cabal trying to kill us outright, they find ways to teach us, and we kind of buy into their plans by eating certain foods, by exposing ourselves to technology, things like this, and then we literally cull ourselves. So eugenics is it's a word derived from the Greek eu meaning good and genics meaning to create. And dysgenics is a better term, I feel like, for that, because what it's actually suggesting is that through the way that we live our lives, if we're not careful, we'll be downgrading our species and evolution instead of upgrading it. And that's what they want us to do, these service to other, service to self groups. On service to other worlds, honest communication and discussion and debates, which are actually what true politics is, provides a forum for the merits of an idea to be demonstrated and explores. Individuals are encouraged to think freely and speak honestly so meetings of the mind can take place and true authentic social harmony can form. This is what a de jure contract is, when two people of their own free will, of their own mind and body, willingly enter into an agreement. A de facto agreement is one where it's kind of forced on you, and because you comply, they can assume that you must agree. So two very different things. So ascension to a higher density takes place when social harmony and individual growth reaches a maximum. At this stage, the guardian groups instruct the custodian groups to begin diplomatic relations with the third density sphere. Arguably, this is kind of where we're at right now. We've had a huge influx of contact since about the 1940s, and it just seems to be getting more and more. So the newly emerging unified planetary consciousness is now guided through social upliftment via contact with more advanced cultures, and this actually crystallizes whatever path that they're coming on, whatever path they've chosen. So now we're going to learn some of the essential information behind how we actually create social harmony. So I'm going to assume that most of you want to go to the service to other worlds. Based on that assumption, how do we get there? Well, what can we do now to manifest this world? This is actually going to focus on understanding the tools we need to further that service to others agenda. Well, the agendas are usually regarded as oppressive, so I'm talking about, the concept of an agenda. An agenda is simply the underlying intentions and motives of a group. Thus, it is advisable we unite and contemplate the knowledge we need to manifest our service to others agenda. Now, it should be noted that in my studies of ET cultures, almost all of them recognize the principles I'm about to describe here, especially regarding the laws of social groups. ET messengers describe this implicitly, so they actually do it in their behavior, how they interact with us, how they respect our free will and our rights, how they engage us and form that handshaking process of negotiation. And then they also do it explicitly by just what they say. So what makes a civilization? Well, a civilization is defined as the stage of human and social development and organization that is considered most advanced. Social development means how organized and effective the social order is in facilitating the development of all people, while at the same time maintaining social order. So a society is a challenging thing. Not only do you have to try to support the individual in giving them the best opportunity they can to learn and grow, but you also have to try to maintain the order. And because there's different levels of attainment and wisdom and morality and things like this, it can be somewhat complicated. But in simple terms, all social groups, whether a dozen people or a nation, are defined by what they agree exists via their use of language to communicate. This is called articulated knowledge. So A civilization basically works in the arena of articulated knowledge. When we all can agree that something is real, like extraterrestrials, like chemtrails, like food, good food, like better technologies, once we agree that that's even a reality, now what can happen? We can all try to work together to realize something in relation to that articulated knowledge. So all social endeavors, all social endeavors play out in the circumscribed space of what is known. Anything that is unknown, unrecognized, has almost no power to affect large-scale change. So how do societies work? At this point, I'm gonna start introducing, I've written here axiomatic rules that kind of describe, based on the knowledge that comes through what some of these positive cultures have done, to how we can actually move forward and some values we should be doing to try to propel us forward. So society is an incorporation of individuals that work together to maintain mutually agreed upon values, desires, and rights. The venue through which agreement takes place is a political forum. The true purpose of politics is to provide a venue where new and old truths are discussed for the purpose of developing social policy. A better argument ideally replaces a lesser one, accounting for time and space delays due to cultural calcification. So in other words, an argument is simply a statement. I say, hey, it's cold outside, or hey, it's warm outside, and then the reason I know it's cold or outside is because I went outside and I looked there, and I present a value or a statement. That is an argument. The best argument is the one that should win. And in a society, in a culture, in a civilization, that's what essentially keeps everything flowing. So in other words, the most articulated or coherent statement of truth is the thing that should be guiding that civilization. And again, this is in relation to service to other societies. So here's our first rule. An evolving culture must educate the people about law, rights, and effective forms of analysis and thinking. The individual needs to comprehend the limits of existence, which is law. They must understand the behavioral zone they can act within, which are their rights, and what responsibilities and obligations are expected in relation to their rights. They must learn how to think and analyze properly, discern wisely. So communication is the foundation of trust, and trust, in a lawful sense, is the agreement that something exists. So an evolutionary culture must also value trust as the principle and foundation of society. So trust is the metaphysical cord that connects free will creatures. So trust is, the fact that we're all here sitting in this room is an example of trust in a certain sense. Again, when you have recognized that something exists and you work with other people, now you can, or speak that to other people, now you can work together in some way to form something. And all wealth, all advancement, all proceeds through this concept of trust. So this is what we're going to talk about now is the role of knowledge and how we as individuals come to know the truth and how that actually works from a psychological and philosophical perspective. So imagine that reality as a whole, what is known and unknown, is part of a territory or a piece of land. There might be mountains on the land, there might be a river, there might be like a city or a castle. And that's going to represent the unknown, like what is something that we have to discover. The raw and unarticulated whole truth. This might be trees, mountains, and volcanoes. If you want to get from the sea to the top of the mountain, a map is something that will help you get there, right? Well, a map is a tapestry of symbols that represents a territory. So if a map is made well, you can look out into the territory and see that the symbols on the map correspond to the things on the land. So what we're basically describing here is the difference between what's happening in reality and then what's happening in your perception and your knowledge. And your knowledge represents reality, but it isn't reality itself. So the course you plot from the sea to the mountain uses a map. You can see by looking on the map that there are obstacles in between you and your destination and your starting point. You know that you have to cross a river before you can start climbing the mountain. And so because you value dry feet, you choose a course that takes you over a bridge instead of trying to walk through the river's strong waters. So in other words, what we're talking about here is that once there's the reality that's quote-unquote outside of us, we have the map, which is the knowledge that we're using to understand where all of the elements of reality are. And then we use our values to actually plot a course to get someplace on that map, using our knowledge. So the territory in the preceding example represents reality in the raw form, the chaos of the unknown or whole truth. The whole truth, knowledge plus raw, undefined experience, is chaos because it hasn't been explained or understood yet. Through seeking the truth, the chaos of the unknown becomes order via knowledge. So beliefs, worldviews, conclusions, scientific theories, and so on are psychologically act to bring order to the chaos of the unknown. So when we talk about order and chaos, we're talking about how you as an individual bring order to your own life. And when you build knowledge, what you're actually doing is you're creating a map of meaning that allows you to better understand what's happening in your world. Our knowledge about reality is represented by the map and order that has been created through the adventure of seeking the truth. So we literally bring order to chaos by seeking the truth. So here's another rule. An evolving culture must value order above chaos, but also recognize that the individual and their capacity to think clearly and speak freely brings order to social chaos. An evolving culture also must value true knowledge over false knowledge. It must create accurate records in libraries where individuals can inform themselves about the world through the study of history. Something that's really important. That's one of the reasons why history has been so obstructed, because the history represents the accumulated body of all of our knowledge that we're trying to pass on to future generations. So, what are values, and why is it important for free speech? Well, values articulated form the foundations of cultures and societies, often enshrined by traditions, creeds, and cultural maxims. So we might value one thing, and because of that, we're going to form a society that works together to realize our mutual values. That's basically what a society is. Now, freedom of speech impregnates an evolving culture with the values of the individual. So, as individuals, we each have our own set of values. And when we speak freely, we actually form a greater tapestry of social harmony around whatever the thing is that we value. A value acts as a personal technique for instilling the love of order. So you might value, being dry opposed to being soaking wet. You might value being warm opposed to being cold. All of that is going to instill in you, because you value certain things. You're actually going to create an orderly process for ensuring you have those things. Maybe you brought water here today because you value not being thirsty, so you can have water to drink. It's very, very simple type of an idea. So another rule, an evolving society must create a forum wherein individuals can speak freely about their values so as to form a body of mutually agreed upon values based on universal applicability. So what I mean by universal applicability is that if one person values, pizza, they might really love pizza, but does that mean everybody has to eat pizza? No, of course not, right? So we have to make sure that as individuals, we speak our minds so that we can together work as a culture to ensure each of our values and our rights are upheld. An evolving society must balance and harmonize social outcome with personal opportunity. So a society that focuses too rigidly on equality of outcome devalues self-mastery. This is a huge point I can talk about a lot. It's a pretty hot button issue right now in mainstream politics. But it's basically the idea that we have to find a balance between what actually a person gets from their fruit of their labors and the opportunities that they have. And if we're really focused too much on everybody getting the same thing no matter what they're doing, then it actually devalues self-mastery. Why would anybody want to try to master themselves if the person who expends almost no effort gets the same thing as the person who has done a lot of effort? So the individual is the mode of society, the smallest building block. Individuals navigate reality by creating a map of knowledge using their values to plot a course in their perceived world, just like I was describing earlier. A society is a group of people navigating the same world together using a similar map. That's why communication is important. We're basically finding a way to create a better map of meaning, a better representation of the world, and through doing that, we can better plot the course that we want to leave. Another rule, an evolving society recognizes that all controversy, disagreement, personal and social hardship, etc., are opportunities for improving the individual and by extension the society at large. Culture is the soil through which the individual is nurtured and matures, and as such, culture must recognize the inherent sovereignty of the individual while at the same time protecting the whole from error, mistake, and malevolence. So communication is what allows agreements to form and disagreements to be settled, thereby acting as the chief supporter of trust and harmony. An individual has a right to the benefits of the society, but also is responsible for maintaining the society as a co-creative participant. This is basically in terms of a lawful, rights, what is the duty of an individual to society? That's basically it. So what is an agreement? Well, using the phonetic etymology, the word agreement can be broken down as a combination of two words, aggregate and mentis. Aggregate means to form a whole from different parts, and mentis refers to the mind or consciousness. So an agreement is the unification of minds through honest, complete, and effective communication. In law, negotiation of a contract is valid only if there has been a meeting of the minds. So in other words, that the minds have actually gotten on the same page with each other. That is, true communication requires honesty, full disclosure, and good faith so that each person can share their map of knowledge with the other, forming a new map that incorporates each individual. So essentially what we're doing when we're communicating with each other is we're giving ourselves the opportunity to learn from each other. There's experiences that you have that I don't have, and that's the case for everybody. So by engaging in this process, we literally enhance our knowledge. We get to draw upon each other. So we have to value the truth and free speech in order to do this. And a really good example of this is musicians. If you're in a band, if you want to play music with somebody else, you have to agree to a set list, right? You got to agree to go somewhere. You have to agree to learn different parts of the musical band. It's pretty simple in that sense, but imagine that the whole of society is like that. It's a giant symphony, and we each have this unique role to play. If we can only take the time to practice and master ourselves, what world could we make? So an evolving culture must value clear and honest, effective communication for the purpose of facilitating valid, true, and lasting agreements. This also has a healing effect on individuals so they can receive the benefit of holistic brain function. So when you actually engage in this, your biology actually changes. Your brain starts to work better with itself, the right and left hemisphere. And it produces positive emotions, so you actually feel good doing this. So now we're going to get into, which is probably one of the most important sections of the talk, the principles of an honorable contract. So contracts are an essential and unavoidable aspect of creature existence. So what I mean by that is any time that there's an effect that you experience in reality, that means there was some type of contract in place to realize it or bring it about. So in this description, obviously, we're not talking about words on a piece of paper that you have to sign, although that obviously incorporates the concept of a contract. What we're talking about is the relationship that two beings have with each other. So proper knowledge of contracts is necessary for individuals in a society to honor each other's free will and work to establish an evolving and advancing society. So the fact that you actually understand how a contract works, and you can see how the contractual realities are unfolding in your world, gives you incredible power to create social harmony. This is a body of knowledge I discovered about 6 years ago, and it completely transformed me when I made that discovery. And it's really useful too. So what are some of the elements of a contract? Well, this is one, again, it's a taxonomy. This is the 4 methods of breaking up a contract. There's other versions I've seen where they break it up into 6 and even 12 components, but this is a really good example of this. We have first, the individual. The individual intends to create something. They have a desire in their mind. They want to do something. And they have to interact with other life forms in order to get there. Then we have, I'll just list these other 3 here. We have negotiation, we have acceptance, and consideration. So as I mentioned, the intention to create, that's the individual part. Each of you had the intention to do something about coming here, or maybe you had some other intention in your life. You wanted to learn music, you wanted to be a better chef, you wanted to, whatever it is. That intention is internal. Then, if that intention can be congruent or work with other people, now the potential for a contract exists. And at that stage, we have negotiation. So the individual approaches others who have a similar desire. And in an effort to cooperate, they communicate that intention, which basically constitutes an offer. So when you go to your friends and you say, hey, I'm hungry, are you guys hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry. Let's go down the road and grab a bite to eat at the restaurant. That intention you have was communicated. You're actually engaging in a negotiation process at that point. And you can debate about what the merits of the intention. Maybe you say you don't want to go eat at the restaurant down the road. Maybe you want to go cook the meal at your house. So you can debate how this intention to eat food or this desire is actually going to be expressed. So clear communication is essential for this. You need full disclosure. So what I mean by full disclosure is that anything related to your intention, any knowledge you have, has to be discussed. You have to put it out there for the other people that you're working with to understand. You have to have good faith. You're actually speaking honestly. You haven't committed any wrongdoing. That's what clean hands means. And this ensures cooperation is harmonious and any potential problems are addressed. So another thing about negotiation is that it's also needed anytime new information emerges that puts the original agreement of truth into question, thereby restoring trust and proper ability to navigate the reality. So let's say, using the example I just gave a moment ago, you wanted to meet with your friends for dinner, and then one of your friends realizes, you know what, I'm not really hungry, I'm actually feeling kind of sick. Well, they've just discovered something new, right? So what's going to happen? They're probably going to talk to their friends and say, hey, listen, I'm not actually going to be going to the restaurant because I feel kind of sick. So that they've renegotiated, they put the person on notice. So from a social harmony perspective, this section right here is arguably one of the most important. Anytime you have an intention, you have to think carefully about what your intention is. Who's going to be affected by this? Do I have the knowledge to carry it out? Do I need other people to help me with this? And then you have to engage in honest communication. You have to talk to them. What is your intention? How are you going to help work with each other to realize this intention? Are you being fully honest? Maybe there's some research that needs to go into how you're going to realize this intention. But over time, what happens is that you're going to find there's an actual technique, there's a really good process for using good negotiation skills in forming agreements. And this, obviously, this works at an interpersonal level, it works at a business level, it works at all levels of reality. So it's a really good skill to develop. So we have the third element, which is acceptance. So once each individual, having properly negotiated and worked out all factors related to their mutual desire to create, explicitly agree to participate. So they actually make a verbal statement or written statement that they agree. And each individual communicates to others in the agreement what their responsibility is and if they know how to execute their obligations correctly. So in a musical outfit, if you have a drummer, a bass player, a singer, a guitar player, a pianist, each of them is going to spend the time to practice that instrument, to practice the piece of music, and they'll probably talk to their bandmates and say, hey, yeah, that song that we're going to play on Thursday? I got that section, no problem, I can handle it. So the last aspect is consideration. This is when each individual actually performs their duty and executes their obligations, resulting in the manifestation of the intended goals. This is when we actually get together to do the thing that we've been talking about. Now the fruits of this mutual labor are dispersed, excuse me, got a little typo there, dispersed to all parties in accordance with the terms of the contract. So basically, who enjoys the fruits of the labor? If you're getting together because you want to create a farm and you're going to be having apples and things like this on the farm, well, who's going to benefit from that? Well, you're going to negotiate that with the people that you formed the agreement with and determine who's going to be receiving the benefits of the work. So competence, this is another really important concept. Competence is the quality of an individual to properly engage and execute honorable contracts via knowledge acquisition skills, honest communication, honor, and effective execution of acceptance and obligations, duty. So in other words, the more competent you are, the more effectively you're able to work with other people to realize some collective goal. So arguably competence is like one of these things that is incredibly helpful for us as individuals as we try to realize some of these really big goals for trying to make the world a better place. So a society must instill and exalt honor as one of the highest individual and social values. So key knowledge to a golden age. So honorable contracts. It's critically important that an evolving society teach individuals how to form and execute honorable contracts. When a population fails to engage in honorable contracts, strong and tyrannical systems of government are needed to deal with the disagreement and chaos that results. This is, again, from a cabal's perspective, this is one of the reasons why they're working so tirelessly to keep us divided. Because we can't work with each other, we can't honor our contracts, we don't honor our word, we might steal, we might cheat, we might do all these horrible things, and that creates a lot of chaos. And now they have a justification to impose these horrible tyrannical controls on us. So the key to our golden age is a society founded on an individual taking up their responsibility to learn and understand and act in an honorable way. Without this, the service to self agenda takes over. So the service to self system of order of tyranny requires that most people in the population lack competence and honor. I mean, if you look at popular forms of music, you're constantly seeing criminal behavior, dishonorable behavior, things like this, exalted and revered as some type of like amazing thing, right? Well, that's partially their method of trying to indoctrinate us into this program, is because when we can't take care of ourselves, when we can't honor our own agreements and form harmony, it gives them the chance that they need and the actual lawful rights to try to impose order on us. All advanced societies, both service to self and service to other, are highly aware of contractual realities and place a great value in them. I would say the two most premier works I've seen where this concept of a contract and free will are echoed is the Law of One and the Urantia Book. It's like everywhere in there. It's particularly the Law of One. They're constantly talking about honoring free will and the process that they use to actually engage in contacting the being. So legal systems and consent. So a legal system is a tapestry of agreements for how to manage the mutually agreed upon values of a group. It evolves with scientific advancement and spiritual revelation. Both sources expand what is known. So an honorable legal system is a series of contractual agreements formed between individuals in a non-coercive, honorable way. So the legal system has to be one that people actually agree to. They learn about and then decide of their own free will, hey, I want to participate in this. Or they might say, wait a minute, I really like all the stuff you got here, but all this other stuff, I'm not into at all. We need to figure that out again. We need to renegotiate. So it's a contractual process from society to the individual. The founders of a society must provide a way for its inheritors to improve the policies of the past. It must also provide a path for de jure consent opposed to de facto compliance. So the youth must agree to honor the societal contracts via true consent, not blind obedience. And that's not what we have in our world today. What we have in our world today is a system based on blind obedience. If you don't follow the laws in a society or culture, what happens? You go to jail. You have the book thrown at you, that kind of thing. Now, it's a complex situation in that, on the one hand, if a political system is inherently tyrannical and enslaving, then we have a right and a duty to try to do something about it and make it better. But we have to try to follow an honorable process as much as possible, because if we create a lot of controversy, if we create a lot of chaos and problems, then it prevents the benefits of what we're trying to do from really taking hold. And that's why being strategic is really important, opposed to being overly idealistic. Since there are many ways of achieving the same effect, a legal system is not only science-based, so truth-founded, but it's creative. So a legal system is a kind of like metaphysical technology for the maintenance and advancement of social harmony. So in other words, we might all agree that each of us have the right to life, right? But there's a lot of ways to ensure that we can all have our lives, that we can all keep living, right? So because of that, we get to participate in that process. It's something that evolves with us. It's not something that we're just blindly adhering to. So the values of a golden age. So engender true sovereignty. So what does a golden age society look like? What are the things that they actually want to bring and realize into the world? Well, as we just discussed, they want to engender true sovereignty. So sovereignty of each being is a potential that is realized through self-mastery. That's what sovereignty essentially is. When the individual demonstrates their perfection of knowledge, wisdom and honor, and social service, forsaking all claims and pursuits of self-serving status, which is essentially a vow of poverty, they are now qualified to be a custodian of the society, a living embodiment of that society's cultural values. This is the status of true sovereignty. So in other words, in this definition of understanding sovereignty, it means somebody who's done a tremendous amount of self-mastery work, who's learned a lot, who has eclectic wisdom and knowledge, but also they value and they place a greater influence, or emphasis, on the maintenance of the society and the rights of all beings as a whole. And because of that, they will not try to engage in any type of activity that harvests energy or or money or wealth or things like that from people. So that's what I mean by take a vow of poverty. I don't necessarily mean that they literally don't want to enjoy any material goods. It's the idea that you've willfully and intentionally made a vow or contract with that society to maintain the society without necessarily trying to harvest it for your own personal gain. So the goal of an evolving service to others culture is engender the individual to become more selfless or truly sovereign so that it can properly manage the rights of all other beings in the society. An individual who does that effectively becomes an agent of the divine. So they, in this sense, they do have a quote-unquote divine right to rule because they've actually embodied the values of altruism in the universe, the service to other philosophy. And in this sense, they act on behalf of the Creator via their expert knowledge of law. So spiritual science and religion. So how does science and religion come together? Well, science is a systematic study of the universe and all things in it, with the goal of creating objective knowledge, valid truth arguments. It is the pursuit of truth in all forms through empiricism, which is objective, philosophy, and phenomenology, subjective. Today, science is more akin to dogmatic religion than honest truth-seeking. So as a general rule, science is the backbone of a true and just legal system due to it being founded on knowledge of truth. As such, an evolving society must liberate the individual to pursue truth regarding all things. So in this sense, science doesn't just deal with, material things like particles and galaxies and stuff like that. It's about acquiring knowledge at all levels. Spiritual science is the recognition that all phenomena should be investigated, including the ultimate nature of reality. Subjective experiences and objective things should both be studied seriously. Science and religion can only join hands if both fields abandon dogma and closed-mindedness, encouraging all people to participate in the collective search for truth. So philosophy. Philosophy is something that's really important. Philosophy is the study of the foundational nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. And it's the art and science of exploring meanings. So philosophy it's inescapable. I know, a lot of people probably heard philosophy is done in like academic circles and things like this. Well, in reality, we're each a type of philosopher. You're already philosophers. We're all endowed with consciousness that generates meanings automatically as we interact with reality. So this is something that's built into you. What is a meaning? Well, a meaning is an inference, an insight, a conclusion, or a theory regarding some data set. Values are discovered through analyzing meanings. So that's how we actually come to know what our values are, because we've thought carefully about something. And we used our minds to distill the meaning behind it. Philosophy is the gateway through which all knowledge passes, whether materialistic or spiritual. The ultimate nature of existence is so abstract, we can only contemplate it using the philosophic mind. So basically what we're describing here is whether or not we're talking about something fairly mundane, like let's say you're cooking a meal and you accidentally bump into the hot pan on the stove, it's going to burn you, right? So what you're going to think about that. You're going to say, wait a minute, I don't want to feel that again. So you're going to think about what that means. And then because you think about what that means, you're going to distill from it a value. You value not being burned. So because you value not being burned, you're going to change your behavior in accordance with that value. And all of that happens in the mind as a philosophic exercise of analyzing meanings. So an evolving society must encourage and support philosophy in all respects. It must allow the individuals to think freely and discuss ideas with others so as to constantly fuel the advancement of philosophic skill. So unlike, in a general and automatic sense, we're all engaged in the art of philosophy. We all derive meanings from our experience. But if you consciously engage in the skill of developing your philosophy, now you can completely expand your knowledge in other areas that you might not be able to do in a normal everyday sense, like discernment. So I would describe discernment as a method of knowledge purification. It makes your knowledge more complete, more perfect, more accurate. Discernment is the act of judging well, the ability to identify an accurate picture of reality. It acts as a guidance mechanism for knowledge, purifying it of its falseness. Now, epistemology, this is a branch of philosophy that deals with the interpretation of information, particularly the basis of belief. Epistemology answers the question, why is this true? And that is an epistemic exercise. So when you ask yourself, well, how do I know that this is true? What is the basis? What's the evidence? What's the argument that the evidence is making? And what's the logic? You're engaged in epistemological exercise right there. And I would argue that the truth-seeking, everybody who's gone through this truth-seeking path, which arguably you all have, you've engaged in that epistemological exercise yourselves. You've asked yourself, well, how do I even know this is true? You know, just because I say it doesn't mean that it's true. You have to think for yourself about these things, right? And that's really where the fruit of this truth-seeking path comes, because you develop your own intrinsic knowledge. You're not dependent on me or anybody else for that matter. You have your own foundations in the knowledge. So discernment facilitates truth-seeking, self-mastery, the formation of honorable contracts, because you have to discern the quality of character, what's happening, or do I really have to go meet that person at that place? Everything that's related to a contract, it all requires discernment at some level, and philosophy, of course. And it's the art of exploring experience for ultimate meanings and values. So this is the spiritual advancement aspect. So a rule, an evolving society must discover the rules of discernment, which are epistemological virtues, and teach them to all citizens. Discernment improves as the intuitive feeling aspects of experience, which are called phenomenological, merge with the logic and reason in science. So discernment isn't a purely logical thing. It's not just a right brain, or excuse me, left brain activity. It's a synthesis of intuition, insight, emotion, and logic and reason. It uses all these forms of data. Benevolent technology. Well, technology is defined as the application of scientific knowledge for a practical purpose. So if we've developed a kind of spiritual science, what does that mean? Well, it means that we can develop all sorts of very interesting technologies. Again, the legal system itself is a type of technology. It's a non-physical technology, a metaphysical technology. Once science and religion merge, forming a scientific spiritual institution, technology can be designed to enhance the purpose of life, which is self-mastery and social harmony. So we can one day, through our desire to form unity and discuss how we're going to use some of these amazing tools that we have, we can form technologies that actually help us solve the problems of drudgery, right? Because we don't want to have to necessarily slave away and toil away in the fields. But also we can continue to ensure that we're enhancing our spiritual growth and development. So benevolent technology challenges the individual to grow wise and master the self, while at the same time improving the quality of life in general. Technology is a tool for automation and enhanced perception, scientific measurements. So not only can we make things easier because we can, have a sewing machine or something like this, but it also enhances our ability to perceive reality. We can build these giant telescopes that look out into the universe and see what we can find out there. What's a benevolent economy? Well, an economy is a system that a society uses to distribute goods and services amongst the population. This is often done using a monetary system of accounting through the use of currency or an arbitrary measure of value. Now, due to the fact each individual has the capacity to create, work, and innovate, a system of accounting is needed to measure the products of enterprise and value them according to the prevailing values of the society. The market serves as a valuation dispensation system wherein a product or service is offered and individuals use currency to purchase it, thereby establishing a value. So that's essentially the basic foundations of what an economy is. So because we can all create things, because we can innovate, because we each have a creative capacity, we can exchange what we create with each other. And in the act of doing so, boom, an economy is born. So as a rule, an evolving society must recognize the inherent value of the individual and employ technology to make life better with improved reduction in energy and time costs. A debt-based monetary system, which is the one we have today, prevents this from taking place due to the fact that it places personal wealth at a higher value than social progress. A credit-based monetary system encourages advancement in efficiency while it abhors needs of waste and planned obsolescence. I wish I had more time to talk more about that, but that's a fascinating aspect to consider right there. A moneyless society. So a moneyless society is one where goods and services can be procured without the use of an accounting through financial systems. So, you know, we've heard a lot about this moneyless society where we don't have to deal with money anymore, right? And that's arguably a goal that we want to try to achieve. But the accounting itself still takes place, it just happens in consciousness. We just form a tapestry of agreements because we're not all trying to war and combat with each other. We have implicit trust in each other because we've demonstrated honor, we've cultivated honor in each other, and because we can form honorable contracts and actually have valid agreements with each other, we can exchange goods and services without having to take a tally of every single thing that's happening. So it's another benefit to forming a society that is in alignment with service to other values. A moneyless society provides wealth to the people on a credit basis predicated on the individual accepting their obligations to society. So in other words, in a moneyless society or a credit-based society, a credit-based monetary system, excuse me, it's assumed that the individual is a creative, that they are going to create and innovate and do good things in the world. So we're going to support that implicitly. But as the other side, the individual has to accept that they have some kind of responsibility to the society that they live in, at the very least to try to make it better than what they've inherited. A moneyless society can only form when self-mastery and social service are regarded as the highest social values. Additionally, the citizen willingly takes on the burdens of all people in part by providing more than they take. So it's this over-unity concept of kind of like a free energy idea, so that individuals produce more products and stuff, and because everybody's producing all of this stuff, we're living in this amazingly abundant world where we really don't have to keep so much track of it. That's where we're headed. All right, so bringing this to a close, looking to the future. Now we've discussed what an ideal service to other society is based on an analysis of ET cultures. What can we do to move this forward? Well, as individuals, we must gain knowledge and develop a taste for self-mastery. We must honestly seek the truth, exercise philosophy and discernment, and bravely share ideas with others honorably via non-violent, consensual communication. As groups, we must develop social tolerance, we must engender free speech, and strive for honorable interaction. We must learn the laws of contracts and employ the rules of honorable engagement in all areas of life. And most importantly, we need to set aside tribalism identity, us versus them, and engender cosmic identity, where we are all children of the divine for the development of human unity. Do you hear the call? The challenges we face are real, monumental, and global in scope. Locked within each of us are common values and desires, such as the need for clean food, fresh water, and healthy habitation. Additionally, we are all united in our need for truth and high-quality living standards. Thus, remember we're talking about potential and intention to create. If we all have these values, I'm making an assumption that that's what's happening here, then what does that do? It creates the potential for an agreement, a contract. So we have the potential for a service to other society is waiting to be actualized if we can set aside our differences and work together. So let's continue this discussion. The information presented in this talk is only a small taste, like really tiny. I had to do a lot of editing to get it to this level. The information presented in this talk is very small. The wisdom offered through ET contact is extensive. We are each living in a time where, through the internet, we have access to wisdom of the ages. So literally the apocalypse, the great unveiling has arguably already happened. We're in it right now. All the knowledge we need to realize the golden age is already at our fingertips. All we have to do is work together to use it properly. The question is, are we willing to accept the responsibility that our right to life demands? Are we willing to set aside emotional reactivity, offense, learn forgiveness, and serve others? Let's continue this discussion in our circles. I would argue we need to learn forgiveness and tolerance so that we can stop fighting with each other about small issues. Surely the promise of a golden age is better, for a better world is worth sacrificing our personal comfort for. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I have 5 minutes, I've been told, so I can take a couple questions if there are any questions. Yes, right there.
Hi.
Oh, hold on one second. She's going to bring you a mic so we can get it for the recording.
Hi, you touched briefly earlier in your presentation on the idea of the creator as a singularity. I was wondering if you could expand on that. That's something I struggle with, so thank you very much.
Okay, boy, that's a really good question. Well, the creator is a singularity in the sense that it's infinite. So if you think about finite things, like, your clothes, your cell phone, it's circumscribed. It exists in a certain place and a certain time. Well, the creator exists everywhere, at all places. It's literally the opposite of finiteness. And because it's the opposite of finiteness, it is what we call a singularity, especially in mathematics and physics and things like this. So what I mean by that is the creator, from our perspective, you can recognize a singular type of phenomenon or an infinite type of phenomenon because it applies everywhere. It's all over the place. You can't get away from it. So that's kind of one thread to that concept. So I think that, no problem. Anybody else have a? Yeah.
Yeah, I had one kind of piggybacking off that one. So you mentioned the deity groups, and I'm a very visual learner, so I was wondering, is there a group now or a set of individuals now who you would consider in that group?
Like operating on the earth right now? Yes, I would say some of the religious figures from history could qualify as deity personalities, like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna. They're kind of this embodiment of this incredibly cosmic consciousness that applies everywhere, that is embodied in an actual being, and then that being, it's not the consciousness itself, but it lives it out in the flesh, and you get to see that. So that's a good example, I would say.
Wow, that was like the perfect model, and it looked really easy for a really good society. And is there a simulated model of something like this?
Not that I'm aware of, but there are several groups working very hard to realize what I've discussed here. I'm involved in one of them. They've been going on for about 30 years now, and they've distilled an amazing body of information that is going to be very helpful for what we're trying to do in the future. So.
Oh, I was just going to say, Justin, this really makes me think of something that I know my destiny is leading towards, the intentional communities movement.
Right.
And that's what they're working towards. They may not be aware that they're embodying principles taught from ETs, although some of them are.
Certainly.
There's one near you, a couple of them.
Oh yeah, they're all over.
Twin Oaks.
Yeah, yeah.
And Gesundheit.
That one I didn't know about. Okay. God bless you, by the way. Yeah, intentional communities, that's a really good point. The intentional communities are, that is basically people doing exactly what I was talking about. They get together, they decide what world do we want to live, and then they try to do that.
You mentioned early in your presentation that evil or dark acting is there on purpose to spur the service to others. Would that be your hypothesis?
Yes, I'd say generally speaking, if we live in a universe based on free will, then because of that, it creates the opportunity for people to choose malevolence as a form of realizing their desires. So instead of working with people, they, harvest energy and things like this. And because we're all in the same world together, there's people that are trying to do that, and there's an opposing force. There are people trying to do something else, and vice versa.
So do you think that's ultimately good then? Because that they're there to spur the growth of the positive?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's a kind of transcendent idea of good, I guess you could argue. But based on the information that I've read in preparing this documentation and the presentation, that is the belief of a lot of these groups, especially the Law of One and the Pleiadians as described by Barmakiniak and Bashar. There's a host of them. They all kind of seem to believe that that's what's happening. So.
Okay.
I was wondering, what is the role of karma in this cosmology that you kind of sourced and brought together? Because you said that all beings maintain equal potential. So is that the case even for fourth and fifth dimensional or vibrational worlds where those worlds have chosen service to self?
Sure. I would say, to answer your question about karma, yes, when a society hasn't evolved to the point where they actually have a valid legal system and a lawful system, then karma kind of acts as the nudging force to move things along. So, you know, when you steal from somebody, when you do something bad to somebody, when you defame their reputation, especially if you're living in a small town, what's going to happen? Word's going to get out that you weren't doing something so honorable, and that you might not be able to have as much social capital in the area that you're living in. So that acts as a kind of like negative karma, right? And then there's other cases to be made that you actually have, you know, either negative experiences, maybe you go through some type of a negative thing that would ideally cause you to think about your actions and your choices. And I think to answer the second part of your question, yes, these fourth and fifth density and higher organizations do have karma as a tool, but it seems as though as the evolutionary scheme progresses forward, karma plays much less of an influence because individuals of their own free will actually start to embody the moral aspects of justice. And therefore the kind of cosmic imposition doesn't need to be there. So.
Do you think universal basic income would be a transitional stage to moneyless society?
I do. I think there's a lot of merit to the universal basic income, which is the idea that a nation or society dispenses some amount of stipends to all the citizenry so that you could receive $2,000, something like this, for your finances. But I also think that we need to be very careful about universal basic income because the ones that I've seen, they also have built into them kind of these social reinforcement policies. So for example, if you happen to say something against the government, if you're not aligning with where the government is trying to move towards, then you could have your stipend removed and taken away. So I think it is certainly a great bridge, but we have to be really careful about how it gets implemented.
What role does our ability to create and understand value arguments and truth arguments play in the evolution of our species?
Wow, great question. Well, truth and value arguments are fundamentally interconnected. So we agree, a truth argument, as I was mentioning earlier, is you observe something in reality, you sit, and because you're a philosophic being, you derive meaning from whatever you're observing, and then you can make a case, you can actually make a statement, you can say, hey, I think there really is this event called contact in the desert happening. I was there, I heard a few people speak, that kind of thing. Well, from there, once the truth has been identified, now, because of the nature of us, because we're in the reality, we're in the world that we're discovering the truth about, we have to navigate that, we're in it, we actually have to do something in it. And in order to do that, we have to value something. So I think it's a pretty abstract definition, but in the role that truth and value arguments play is essential because we're already using these things anyway. We already have a body of knowledge we think is true. And we also have values. We also value certain things. And because those two things work together, when we learn how to use them more explicitly and more clearly in our understanding and our knowledge, especially as a society. So as an individual, you might have a desire to do one thing, and that desire is going to express or help you understand what your values are. But as a society, we really need to come together and understand what we think is real, and then because we know what something is real, now we can form a value path to get there. So, where are we with time? Are we almost up at this point, probably?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody.